Jay here for Stretford, Paddock. This is the Tier 1 Transfer Podcast. Joining me, as always, as usual, is my good friend, Ronaldo Brown.
Sporadically. Shall we call it?
Yes. But you are here today, which is good to see you, because we've got a good guest today, haven't we? Well, we've always got a good guest on this show, but we've got, as usual...
It's a familiar face.
Yeah, it is a familiar face. We've got Dharmesh Sheth from Sky Sports News and the host of the Transfer Talk podcast and the Transfer Show. Dharmesh, thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
No, not at all. We'll get straight into it. This is sort of the internet, online, everything, the telly, the Sky Sports. It's been in a bit of a frenzy recently with Raphael Varane. Just tell us a little bit about that, because obviously you've been covering it. How sort of big a coup do you feel this is for Manchester United? And tell us a little bit about the transfer deal, because from a fan's point of view, this seems like a bit of a bargain, to be honest with you, when we're seeing the fees that are being mentioned.
It does appear that way from the outset, doesn't it? I mean, this one started emerging properly within the last month or so. And once that happened, all of the noises were that, look, let's be cautious about this. I think United were a little bit worried that dealing with Real Madrid, as they had done when they tried to get Sergio Ramos back in 2015, that's why they were treating the Varane deal with a bit of caution. Because if you remember back then, Ramos was giving a lot of encouragement that he was going to come to Manchester United. And then in the end, it looked like he'd almost used Manchester United to get a better deal at Real Madrid. This one felt a little bit different because Varane, into the final year of his contract, he'd won everything he could win at Real Madrid. And it appeared that he just wanted that new challenge, a new country, a new league, a new club, and that club being Manchester United. And the way this deal worked, I mean, you guys probably know more than most how transfer deals work on face value. You need to speak to the club first, and then you need to agree personal terms with the player once you've agreed a fee with the club. This one actually happened the other way around. And United were actually given permission to talk to Raphael Varane's representatives about personal terms and sort that side of the deal out first before then going to Real Madrid to sort out a fee. Now, people would say, why did they do it that way round? Why were they allowed to do it that way round? My theory is because he had a year left on his contract, people know how long personal term discussions can take. There's so many aspects within a personal terms discussion and a contract discussion compared to just trying to agree a fee with a club that I think United and Real Madrid wanted to get that out of the way as soon as possible, because they knew that the easier part almost was going to be the fee. Because negotiating with a club over a player with 1 year left tends to be a lot simpler than if they've got 3 or 4 years left on their contract, because the club can then ask effectively for what they want. Whereas Real Madrid, I think they were quite aware, they were a little bit hamstrung by Varane's contract position. And you talk about bargain, I mean, the figures being bandied around were like 50 million euros plus add-ons. My information is that United's base initial payment is around 34 million pounds. And if all of the add-ons come to bear, and I'm told they are achievable ones, they'll have got Raphael Varane for a total of 41 million pounds, which for a 28-year-old World Cup winner, Champions League winner, La Liga winner, it's not bad at all, is it?
Not really, even though you don't think he lived up to expectations.
He definitely has. He definitely has. I was slightly surprised by this in general anyway, because I didn't expect Real Madrid to let Ramos and Varane go in the same window, but...
Yeah. One thing that interests me there, Dharmesh, when you spoke about going to the club first is usually the way things are done. With Jadon Sancho, just on that one, was that the similar thing, or did United speak to Dortmund first? Or because we heard so many reports that Jadon Sancho wanted to come to Manchester United and the club had spoke to him. Was that a similar way that the deal was worked out?
Yeah, so once more on that situation, sometimes you have a situation where clubs use intermediaries to speak to another club. And that's when you get the situation when you'll sometimes see, oh, Manchester United have made a bid for somebody. But then it's a definition thing. When is a bid a bid? Sometimes United or another club might have used an intermediary to sound out the selling club and say, look, this is how much Manchester United would be prepared to pay. If they were to pay this, would you accept it? And if the club was to say no, somebody could interpret that as Manchester United have had a bid rejected, whereas officially they haven't actually gone in with an official bid, because they'll be sounding out the club first of all. And once they've got a figure in mind, they will use something probably a little bit below that as a starting point for negotiations, and then try and get them down from what they've spoken to their intermediaries about. So I think sometimes you get a situation where it is done like you'd expect it to be done, whether it's a club-to-club contact, but more and more you'll find that clubs don't mind giving permission to a club to sort out personal terms first, because they find that that is the most complicated part of the deal sometimes. And I think that's what happened with Jadon Sancho. So from last summer, United were talking to Jadon Sancho's representatives and to Borussia Dortmund through intermediaries about how much Sancho would cost, but also about what Sancho would require with regard to personal terms. But the thing with Dortmund, they made it clear from minute one last summer, it's 120 million euros by August the 10th. If both of those conditions are not met, there's no deal. And so United didn't want to be held to ransom, number one, by the date, and number two, by the transfer fee, because they said, look, we're in the middle of a pandemic here. This is simply unattainable to try and to be spending that much money, particularly by that date. Now, you can take Borussia Dortmund and you can understand why they did that, because if they're going to let someone like Jadon Sancho go, they need to bring in a replacement. And August the 10th is what they decided, right, if he is still at the club on this date, we keep him, because that's when we're going to go on our pre-season training camp. And we want our squad that's going to be going forward for the next season in place for that pre-season training camp. So you can't blame Dortmund at all. And I think United actually went back in towards the end of the window with a deal that would have got Dortmund more money than they actually got this summer. And people would wonder, well, 18 million pounds Borussia Dortmund have lost out on, really, because United went in with something around 91 million pounds all in. And they've managed to get him this time for 73 million pounds. So people will ask, why did Dortmund not do the deal at the back end of last season? Well, if you look at it, they made a calculated risk and a calculated gamble in that they kept Sancho because they knew he had 3 years left on his contract. Him and Haaland, of course, towards the back end of last season, when they appeared to be out of Champions League reckoning, they came to the fore, both of these players, helped Dortmund get into the Champions League. Now, how much money will Dortmund make out of the Champions League? Probably more than how much they would have lost on a transfer fee had they lost Sancho last summer compared to this one. So I think United can look at that deal and say, we've got a great deal because we've effectively paid 35 million pounds less than what Dortmund were asking for last summer. And Dortmund are saying, yes, we've got less money than we were asking for last summer, but he's helped us get into the Champions League. We've got 73 million pounds guaranteed for Jadon Sancho, and we're going to get the money that the Champions League revenue will bring, which will more than offset the loss that we made on the transfer fee. So I think everyone has looked at that deal and almost claimed victory in it.
No, it does. It makes sense all around when you look at it, especially as well with Dortmund. They won the German Cup as well, didn't they? So they got, he played a big part, obviously, Jadon Sancho. Just going back slightly, to the Varane deal. You mentioned there about a month ago, we first sort of started hearing about this and it really sort of gathered momentum. How long had that deal been sort of worked on, do you feel, or from sort of United's point of view? How long had they been trying to get Raphael Varane? Because, as you said, it was almost like a month ago when it actually looked like this could be happening. Whereas before that, we'd been linked with so many defenders, it was difficult to know which one we were going for.
Well, they would have scouted United because central defence, I think, was one of the priority positions. I know a lot of the fans are saying, well, we've got a right winger, we've got a central defender. There's a big gaping hole. Why are we not signing a defensive central midfielder? Well, that could yet be the case. But when someone like Varane comes along, it's one of those situations where just say a position is not priority. But, I will use the Donny van der Beek as an example. And of course, it hasn't worked out as United would have hoped and as Van der Beek would have hoped up until now. we don't know what's going to happen in the future. It could yet work out for Van de Beek at Old Trafford. But people would have said last summer, it's not a priority position. Why are we buying Donny van de Beek? And what's come to fruition is he's hardly played any football for United. But the fact of the matter is, do you not go for someone who's a young player, who is one of the most sought-after players in Europe, because maybe you don't need him right now? But I think United are showing that, look, let's bring him in, because we're Manchester United. We need to be going for players like this. And when you see someone like Varane, 28 years old, at his peak, supposedly becoming available, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? It's like, even if a defensive central midfielder is perceived to be of a higher priority than a central defender, do you not then not go for Varane because the mentality is we need to bring someone else in first? No, you bring in Varane because you know he's going to improve the team. I've seen these quotes about Sir Alex Ferguson having spotted him when he was like 18 years old. So United maybe could have saved even more money if they got him back then.
I think there was talk of a £3 million deal when he was in France.
Yeah.
Which would have saved a few quid.
You always find them reports though.
Yeah.
About all the top players. But as you've just mentioned, United have addressed two major positions of need as a right winger and a centre half. Do you see United being aggressive in pursuing a possible central defensive midfielder?
I'm sure it would be in the thinking at United. Ollie has chosen to go with Fred and McTominay to protect the defence effectively. I just wonder now how much he will think about the fact that Varane has come in. Does he need two holding midfielders now to protect the defence? The argument then is, do you bring in an absolute world-class defensive central midfielder, and then you can then put in an extra attacker in the, what would it be? It would almost be a 4-1-3-2, 4-1. I don't even know what the formation would be, but you'd be able to put in another attacking midfielder, put it that way. You'd be able to play Pogba in a 2 potentially. I can always hear about this. You always hear about this, don't you? Why is Pogba playing like that for France and he's not playing like that for Man United? I just find it so lazy, the argument, because when you've got someone like N'Golo Kante playing there, there's only one N'Golo Kante, but people are saying, why don't we get someone like N'Golo Kante? Where is he? Who is he? It's all well and good saying United should be signing a world-class defensive central midfielder. Can't name that many.
No.
Exactly. It's such a specialist position. That's why I wonder, is there actually one out there in the market for us? But you did mention Paul Pogba. I want to ask you, what's the latest on him, and is it likely that he is actually going to go to PSG?
Right. You're going to think I'm going to be sitting on the fence here, but I'm told that all options are possible still. He's still talking. Well, his representatives are still talking to Manchester United. So while those talks are still ongoing, there is still a chance, however unlikely he is to sign a new contract, there is still a chance that a new contract could become available. Those three options are going to be, he stays at Manchester United and he signs a new contract, or he leaves Manchester United this summer, or, and if you look at it from the outset, it's probably the third choice. He stays at Manchester United, but he doesn't sign a new contract. And so United are in danger, and they'll be well aware of this, that they are in danger of losing Paul Pogba for free for a second time. I'm sure they just do not want that to happen. But as it stands, I mean, the reports coming out of France is that his representatives are also talking to PSG. We know about PSG's interest. There's definitely an interest there. PSG have got issues themselves in that they need to offload players. There are players like Areola, Ander Herrera, Sergio Rico that they want to get off the wage bill to free up space. And are they doing all of that so that they can go in big for Paul Pogba, not only for his transfer fee, but for his wages as well? And they're expected, we think, to make that interest more formal in the coming days and in the coming weeks. So United, I think, are expecting something from Paris Saint-Germain. But against the backdrop of all of that, there are still talks ongoing with United and Pogba. And if you take on face value what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is saying, he says that every conversation he's had with Paul Pogba has been positive and he's looking forward to the new season. But if you look behind that quote, looking forward to the new season, that is all he's talking about is this season. Because the crux of the matter is, and the grey cloud that's hanging over all of this is, as we know, he's into the final year of his contract. Something has got to come to a head in this summer. And the irony of it all is, when people argue about Paul Pogba and they say he hasn't performed as well as United would have liked for the £89 million they spent, I think you have to look at it on the flip side as well. Have United done all they can to make sure that they get the best out of Paul Pogba? And the ironic thing now is United fans are now seeing something that under Solskjaer, where the recruitment has been much better than it has been pre-Solskjaer. And it's got to the point now where they think they'll be able to get the best out of Paul Pogba with the new signings that are coming in. And if they were to bring in a defensive central midfielder, it would free Pogba like he does for France. But it comes at a time when he's entering the final year of his contract and he could be leaving just when it looks like they could build a team that could get the best out of him.
Typical.
Personally, I feel like, firstly, using Pogba, I think it's definitely got as much negatives as positives. But in a worst case scenario, in my opinion, if Pogba does leave United this summer, do you think there's enough time for United to get a replacement or an adequate replacement of a similar type of calibre of player?
They're looking for midfielders. We know that. Now, the question is, were they looking for midfielders regardless of Paul Pogba's future or not? So if they had been throughout the window in the knowledge that Pogba would possibly still sign a new contract, then there could be deals, well, potentially not deals, but talks and initial contacts that have gone down the line with certain players. There's been talk of Camavinga from Rennes. There's been talk of Goretzka from Bayern Munich as well. The Goretzka one, there seems to be a feeling that, rather like Ramos back in 2015, is Manchester United's name being used, maybe to get a better contract at Bayern Munich? Is it that kind of situation? The Camavinga one, the feeling, and what I was being told is, this was as of like 2 or 3 weeks ago, was that the feeling was that his preference maybe was to go to Spain rather than to come to the Premier League. And the quote that I was given by contact with regard to Varane and Camavinga coming to Manchester United was, both coming to Old Trafford are remote in reality, which would imply one coming and potentially the other one not. But having said that, Varane, as good as done now, and if Pogba was to go, would they go all out then to try and get Camavinga?
Now that we spoke about a few midfielders that you did mention, another one that you didn't quite say, but I've been hearing a lot of rumours about, I know you've seen a lot of things, Jay, and that is Sal Niguez. Is there any kind of credibility around that link with United?
This is the guy who gets linked with Manchester United nearly every transfer window, from what I can tell. Personally, I've not had any information to suggest that they're definitely in for him. There is a possibility that he would fit United's profile, of course. He would. They've been interested in Sal Niguez in the past. I mean, I don't know what you guys think. Would he be the answer for you, for United?
I don't know. It's a funny one because he's a top quality player, but I know he can play as like an 8. Or is he an out and out 6 though? Is he going to be that defensive midfielder you want?
I believe there's a lot of myths when it comes to Sal Niguez and his inability to apparently be a central defensive midfielder. When he was on loan at Rayo Vallecano, actually, in his earlier days, he actually played as a centre half.
Really?
For a majority of that season. So he's definitely got defensive qualities of some sort.
Yeah.
But it just depends on where he's progressed as a player. But I'm not quite sure whether he's exactly what we need.
I don't think you'd
let me ask you guys a question. You guys are big United fans. If you were to have, come September the 1st, United's transfer window's finished, and Ollie's going to pick his strongest 11 players, who would be, I think that look, the goalkeeper situation is obviously one that's probably another podcast, I think. You've got the back four now. If you talk about Maguire and Varane and Shaw and Wan-Bissaka, do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
So then you go to the front three. So Bruno plays.
Yeah.
Sancho's going to play.
Yeah.
Yes.
Rashford on the left, is it?
Yeah, when he's fit.
If he's fit.
yeah.
When he's
100%.
fit. Okay,
Yeah.
Let's assume everyone's fit and everyone's there. Up front.
For me, in a
Cavani.
minute, Cavani. Yeah, maybe longer term Mason Greenwood. I'm not give up on Martial, but I think Cavani's
Definitely Eddie.
So I think a lot of people will agree with those 9 players that you've just said.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't mentioned the goalkeeper, but those outfield 8 players so far. That leaves the 2 biggest questions. Now, if Paul Pogba stays, does he start in that team and who plays alongside him?
It's a good question.
I've been mentioning quite a lot that I feel like the reason why Pogba's not been able to be utilised in a midfield pivot for United is because I don't think Solskjaer, I'm calling him by his surname instead of saying Ollie.
Ollie, you can call him.
So Ollie, I don't think he quite believes in McTominay and Fred as being the out-and-out destroyer, top elite DM that would enable Pogba to be that kind of advanced midfielder in that role.
Yeah.
I think like if you've got Pogba alongside McTominay or alongside Fred, I don't think they're good enough to allow Pogba to play his natural game. And I think I don't know whether if we get a better DM, like you mentioned earlier, you're next to Kante, it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
You can almost cover what you need to do defensively and allow you to be a little bit more expressive in the way you play. But with the way the midfield's set up now, with McTominay and Fred, Pogba can't play alongside them in the midfield pivot.
Who do you play then in answer to Dharmesh's question? Who's coming in for you? Who's in your midfield? Who's the other 2? Is it Pogba and Fred, or is it Fred and McTominay?
It's got to be Pogba and McTominay. And
Fred's
even then,
gone.
Nah, Fred upset me too much during the last season.
But you see, it just illustrates the situation that a lot of United fans are very excited about the transfer window so far. Sancho and Varane coming in, but it just seems to be the elephant in the room is still that position, isn't it?
Yeah.
And is that the position that's going to dictate whether United are there or just thereabouts? Is that the position that's going to turn them from a long distance second, third or fourth behind the likes of a Manchester City to actually genuinely challenging for that title?
I think it is at the minute. I do. I mean, I'm with Ronnie. I think it's none of Fred, McTominay or even Matic, who back in the day would have been perfect, but now he's past his best. I think you can't trust any of them on their own in that role. And I think I would probably do what you've done and go with McTominay, but I think it's not ideal.
I think
you do need an out-and-out DM. And you mentioned there, you look at City, they've had Fernandinho. You look at Liverpool, they've had Fabinho. Chelsea have got Kante. We haven't got that type of player, and I think that's what worries me if we are going to challenge for the title.
I think there is a flip side of it, like what Dharmesh mentioned earlier, is now that we've signed Varane, and you've got you've got a centre-back pairing of Varane and Maguire and how strong that looks. Does that lessen the need of having 2 defensive kind of midfielders in front? Because part of it might be the fact that Ollie could have seen that whoever Maguire partnered with last season were kind of suspect or needed that extra protection. So there could be a case of now that you've got Varane and you've got Maguire in that centre-back pairing, and it's a little bit stronger and doesn't need as much protection, you can be a little bit more ambitious in your midfield pairing in front.
And if they are more ambitious, can you imagine what United will be the entertainers by the looks of it if they go for a more ambitious midfield pairing? Because Ollie might be thinking, right, we've improved the defence because we had a few issues there last season, and despite the number of goals we scored, there were a number of games where United didn't score or only got 1 and didn't seal a win. There were big wins in there, and that helped, the goals for column. But sometimes that masked the overall season when, they were scoring big in 2 or 3 games, but then wouldn't have been good had they spread those 15 goals potentially that they got against Southampton and Leeds over 5 games. to turn 9 points into 15, maybe. You know what kind of difference that would have made. And is he now thinking, right, I will go for a more ambitious midfield two instead of two holders, because now I've got Raphael Varane at the back to shore up the defence, but I've also got Jadon Sancho up front so that he can help us outscore opposition. So he still might be in a position where United are conceding goals, but will they be now in a better position to be able to score more?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it'd be exciting. I don't know if it'd be...
It'd be exciting, but it's going to leave us on a knife edge a little bit.
Yeah, it might do our nerves no good, but yeah, it could be, at least it'll be exciting to watch. And, you know, I have enjoyed the football more under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer than I have under previous managers since Sir Alex Ferguson retired, but I don't know, you know, whether that would work in terms of challenge of trophies, but we'll have to wait and see. Because, you know, obviously we have got two good signings. It's just whether we can get another one done. In terms of players going out as well, you know, you mentioned there Paul Pogba. Jesse Lingard's a player that there seems to be a lot of sort of debate, even confusion around where his future lies. He obviously had that fantastic loan spell and has historically done well at Manchester United. Have you heard any sort of news on that, Dharmesh, in terms of where Jesse Lingard's future could lie?
So, again, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has just said that he is in the plans at the moment. Now, if Lingard is to stay or if he is to go, I think that decision might be left probably after the season has started, because we've got that situation again in the transfer window where the season starts while the window is still open. Now, he's only got a year left of his contract as Jesse Lingard. We know West Ham United are interested in signing him again, but West Ham are also looking at alternatives because of the noises coming out of United at the moment that Lingard looks like he will be staying as it stands. I think also Solskjaer will want to see what the situation is with Rashford, once it's confirmed or not, whether he's going to have surgery on that shoulder problem, how long he's going to be out for, and whether that means Jesse will be staying at the club and playing a bigger part than perhaps he might have done had Rashford been fit. I think it's going to come down to those first few games as well, how much involvement Jesse Lingard is going to have in those squads. Because if, say, for example, Rashford is not involved and Jesse Lingard finds himself not involved even with that injury, then he'll have to make a decision. It will be one of those, I think, that has got all the makings to go late into the transfer window. But as it stands, we've got to take what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is saying on face value, and that is that he's part of the plans at the minute.
There's a lot. I mean, it's more, I think, from hope than expectation. A lot of United fans are saying, "Oh, you know, could there not be a deal there with Lingard for Rice?" Have you heard anything about that at all? Because it seems to be like it just seems to be wishful thinking by some United fans, not all. You know, and I just thought it's worth asking you if you've heard anything that could be remotely true.
I mean, I've heard what you've heard, and whenever I speak to West Ham, it's kind of like laughed off when I've almost suggested anything along those lines. Because look, West Ham are adamant that Declan Rice will not be sold in this transfer window. I mean, of course, we know money talks and that can change, but as it stands, there's no plan in place for West Ham United to sell Declan Rice. On paper, I mean, yes, they want Jesse Lingard, and United fans are thinking, putting two and two together, yes, Lingard plus money, Rice the other way, it's an easy deal to do. But I think what West Ham are trying to build is build on what they did last season. They had a phenomenal season under David Moyes last season when they got into the Europa League. For this season, they'll want Declan Rice part of that squad for this season at least, I would think. And they'd probably think that his price will only go one way if and when they do decide the time is right to cash in on Declan Rice. Look, West Ham fans won't want to hear it, but look, it does look likely that at some stage he will leave because someone will come in with big money. But I think West Ham, given his contract situation as well, hold the cards here and they can dictate that, look, he's not going anywhere, we're keeping him.
Yeah, unfortunately, I thought as much. I mean, I like Jesse Lingard. I don't want to sound too harsh on him, but I thought if he was going to leave and we could get Declan Rice, that'd be amazing. Like yourself, I think that's just sort of wishful thinking. Just moving on quickly to other clubs. I mean, there's a lot of speculation that likes of Manchester City, for example, are going to go big in this window, and there's names like Harry Kane and Jack Grealish being sort of linked to them. And just from a United point, looking at that, it worries me a little bit. Do you expect Manchester City to go big in this window, and could those names that I've mentioned be targets for them?
Just on one point, I mean, the United fans that I've spoken to so far, I think one thing they are happy about is that the business seems to be getting done much more quickly than it has done in previous windows. There's been windows previously when they've been United, they need a striker, and then suddenly deadline day, Odion Ighalo comes in, Edinson Cavani comes in, and they've left it very, very late. This time they look like there's an intention to get all the business done very, very early. With City, I don't think, I mean, look, the Euros obviously hasn't helped because they're going for two of the biggest players in the Premier League at the moment. And with that is going to come a premium with the amount of money that they will cost. And the issues that they've got with Grealish and Kane is that, for example, Kane, as much as he would want to leave, he's at a club where the chairman's Daniel Levy, and he is the shrewdest businessman, one of the shrewdest businessmen in the league. So whatever issues Spurs fans might have with Daniel Levy about recruitment and things like that, he will always get a good deal for his players. And with the Kane situation, they can afford to be relaxed because he's got a contract and he's got a few years left to run on that contract. So they can say, you're not going anywhere. But as we know, money talks again. And I just wonder whether it's going to take more of a public declaration from Harry Kane that he wants a new challenge to push this one through, because as long as it stays, we've been told that Kane has told Tottenham he wants to go, then in the public domain, nothing else will get leaked from Tottenham. And what they're trying to do now is put themselves in a position to say, look, he's not for sale. And by doing that, the price is only going to go one way, and that's north. So City, it will be a very, very tough deal to do from the outset. They're obviously interested. They do want to bring in Harry Kane. Will it happen? 50-50 for me.
Yeah.
You can just see Tottenham digging their heels in and saying, it's just not going.
Well, I hope they do, to be honest with you, because Harry Kane at Manchester City fills me with dread.
No, I don't want to think about
or
that.
Jack Grealish, for that matter. Either of those two players going to the Etihad.
Any players that join him really frightens me.
In terms of the window for you, Dharmesh, what's it like for you? And you sort of because we see obviously on the podcast, see on the news, you're in sort of touch with all these different clubs as well. Just sort of tell us a little bit about that, what it's like for you during this period, because it just must be non-stop.
It's very, very busy. Look. There are so many outlets and good journalists out there who are breaking stories all the time. You can't be across every single one. We've got lots of reporters here who've got various different contacts with various different people who are constantly bringing stories in. And look, the way we do our transfer coverage is, for example, I'll give you an example of how I have to work is, if I get a story from an agent who I trust implicitly and who I know will not lie to me and will say the 100% truth to me, even with all of that in my head, I can't run that story straight away, because we have protocols here that we use, that we do checks with the clubs that are involved before we put a story out. So sometimes, look, I know Twitter's not the best judge, but, I've been called various things, which I can't repeat on here.
I find that hard to believe. Twitter's nothing but a lovely place full of compliments.
Yeah. Let's just say I've been called follically challenged, Jay.
I feel your pain.
But not in such nice language. But
I can't quite relate.
It happens. It happens. But we have to go through those checks before we put a story out, because it's not just in the transfer window that we need to deal with these clubs. It's a year-long relationship that we need to maintain. And you have to build a mutual trust, not only with the contacts that you make, like with agents and players and clubs, but also the people who are working within the clubs, because they don't want stories out. They don't. But once you build up relationships with people, you can trust them as well not to lie to you. You know what I mean? So it's just one of those things. Look, we do our checks, and then that's when we put stories out. Sometimes it will be after certain other outlets. Sometimes it will be before. That's just the way it goes.
Just finally to wrap up, tell us, Dharmesh, like what's in the pipeline now for you guys on the Transfer Talk podcast and obviously on Sky Sports News. Just keeping us updated, is it every day?
No, I'm definitely interested.
Yeah.
yeah. So the transfer shows coverage really ramps up from next Monday. That's August 2nd. So at 9 o'clock every weekday morning, you'll have Good Morning Transfers with the team. Then I think it's at midday, it's Transfer Talk. And then at 5 o'clock and at 7 o'clock, it's the transfer show where I'm joined by Kaveh Stolokol and a presenter for that show. And the Transfer Talk podcast will be back next Friday. So that will be the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th of August. If I counted that correctly, yeah. So it'll be the first show of the window will be the Transfer Talk podcast on the 6th of August. So we'll be keeping me busy until midnight on the 31st of August, when I will need a holiday and a dark room.
I was going to say, have you booked a holiday for September? Because you're probably going to need one, yeah.
I always do.
I was going to say, it must be hectic.
In the current climate, it's going to be a really last-minute one, this one.
Definitely. Dharmesh, it's been great chatting to you. Thanks for coming on the channel. Much appreciated. And I always will be checking you out on the on Sky Sports News and on the Transfer Show and Transfer Talk podcast, and getting any updates you've got as well. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on. Really nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
So big thanks to Dharmesh Sheth. Make sure you're checking out all the good stuff that he's involved with on Sky Sports News. I'm sure you are, but there's links as well in the description. Where do you reckon we stand on a defensive midfield, on a midfield? Because he named some names there, didn't he? He said Camavinga, but he said from his information, it was unlikely we were going to get both Varane and Camavinga. And we've got Varane, haven't we? So that looked like it happens. And Niguez was a bit of a, but we're always
thrown out there. Yeah. He basically shut down the Rice links as well, saying that West Ham are completely buckling down.
He put us on the spot as well, didn't he? A man's asking us questions. Not used to that.
Jesus Christ, isn't it?
Like you name your starting 11.
Which, reverse.
Yeah. But
Stuck it on us too.
Yeah, but he's right to do so, because that is the sort of, as he mentioned, the elephant in the room is, do we need that DM going forward, Manchester United?
And we do. But it's just bottom line. I think, if anything, he did say that some of our high-scoring games masked some of our inabilities going forward. I don't know whether I quite agree with that. Defensively was the major weakness last season, until the end of the season when we were slightly better. We conceded, 44 goals in the league? That's well too many if you want to win the title. I think the amount of goals we scored last season in the league was the most we've scored since we won the title last, which was with Fergie 2012, 2013, around that time.
2013, yeah, that's when we lifted
it,
mate.
That's the most goals we've scored. So I think we've been decent going forward. I think Sancho was a great piece to kind of solidify that right wing area. We got a centre half to kind of solidify defensive issues, but that DM is so important, and it's become more important because it's become such a specialist position in world football today. And it seems like every single big club, or the best clubs in the world, have a world-class central defensive midfielder, and we don't. And United can't go into next season going into games where we're playing against Villa and they've got a better midfield pairing than we do. Wow. Do you know what I'm saying? We need a midfield that is going to be challenging at the top, and not going into most games with a weaker midfield than the rest.
I completely agree, my friend. I'm dying for us to get that DM. Let's see if it happens, but whether it does or not, we'll be keeping you posted. And also, you can check out Dharmesh Sheth, obviously, on Sky Sports News and his transfer shows, where they have all the latest. And we'll have all the latest on this channel. So make sure you're liking, you're sharing, and you're subscribing and hitting that notification bell on your subscribe button so you do get a notification every time we go live or we post a video, as we do every day. Ronnie, where can people find you? You
can find me on Instagram. Oh, I always get this wrong.
Go on, you can do this.
5 minutes Instagram.
No, well, that's right, yeah. But
Ronaldo Brown _98 on the Twitter.
You're all right on the Twitter, you aren't you? Do quite well.
I do all right, innit?
Yeah, you do all right. Do some good tweets.
Not too bad.
Yeah, keep it up. Keep it a good way. You know where to find me, Jay Motti on all the socials as well. So make sure you're checking out Ronaldo. Make sure you're subscribing. This has been the Tier 1 Transfer Podcast. Big thanks to Dharmesh Sheth. Thanks for watching.